Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Also real quick, in yesterday's video, I prematurely announced that a new podcast was being released, and it ended up not coming out until just like a few minutes from when I'm recording this. If you missed that video, I mentioned the fact that I was rebranding my old podcast, The Hoopscast, into the Rusty and Mojo Show, where we're going to be focusing on personality and just talking about random shit over basketball, because we already talk about basketball enough as it is. In the first episode, we talk about what it's like being a YouTuber, and if you're interested in seeing that, it will be linked in the description. I really want to see this podcast succeed, so if you could go give it a watch, I would really appreciate it. But today we are talking about Jimmy Butler and whether he is underrated or overrated. I was planning on mixing up the content so there wasn't a back-to-back in this series, but the Curry video that followed the Paul George video also did extraordinarily well, so I wanted to keep the momentum. So if you would like to see more of this series, drop a like on this video. It incentivizes me to keep going. Jimmy Butler has been one of the more polarizing stars in the NBA over the past few years. He came onto the scene in Chicago and instantly became a fan favorite with his winning mindset and gritty play style. However, as Butler got better, the baggage that came with him got much clearer, and as a result, he has had a complicated relationship with some front offices, to put it lightly, as well as some quarrels with teammates, which again is putting it lightly. So with the character of Butler being questioned, this has led to the value of Butler as a whole being questioned, because is he good enough to be really worth his baggage? As a result, Jimmy Butler is one of the most polarizing players in the league, and opinions of him can vary by quite a large margin. So, is Jimmy Butler underrated or overrated? Let's talk about it.
Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
I do feel it necessary to start off by saying that as a Bulls fan, I actually started off my NBA fanhood as a huge fan of Jimmy Butler. In fact, Jimmy Butler is connected to the origin of this channel's name. Jimmy's nickname, coined by Stacey King, is Jimmy Buckets, and when I was in middle school, my nickname was Rusty because I had a nail go through my right hand during a Boy Scout trip when we were playing Manhunt. So I took my nickname and combined it with my favorite player in the NBA at the time and came up with Rusty Buckets. So the dumbass name of this channel is tied back to Jimmy Butler. Funny story there, but I did want to point that out to let it be known that I'm not necessarily impartial to Jimmy Butler, though my opinions of him have swayed quite significantly in terms of whether I like him or dislike him. Jimmy started off his career in Chicago, where he initially got runtime because he was a gritty, athletic, defensive-minded player who couldn't shoot the ball. Not being able to shoot the ball, especially as a shooting guard, is not generally good, but in an offense ran by Tom Thibodeau, he was the perfect fit. Shots fired. But for real, Tom Thibodeau cared so much about the defensive end of the court that even the 30th pick in the draft was given playtime because of how good he was at defense. But of course, the offensive struggles were so significant that even Tom Thibodeau couldn't ignore them, so as a result, he only played around 25 minutes a game in his second season. But the following season, the team really needed a source of offense due to Derrick Rose being out with injury. The team's entire offense was basically DJ Augustine and Joakim Noah backdoor passes, which wasn't much to say the least. I can tell you as a Bulls fan that those years were really hard to watch because of how painstaking every offensive possession was. Every single bucket took an insane amount of effort. Every single possession counted way more for the Bulls than it did for really any other team in the league. They were just that bad at offense. So as a result, when he became a starter in the 2013-14 season, Butler attempted to be a source of offense, and it was not great. He averaged 13 points per game with a 52% true shooting percentage. I can remember one particular play that I really can't find where there was a loose ball and Jimmy Butler found himself wide open from three in the corner, and he sat there with the ball in the corner long enough to check the wind first, and it dropped, but it felt like a relief that it dropped. And I say all this to highlight just how hard it was for the Bulls to score at this time, as well as how bad of an offensive player Jimmy Butler was. But come next season, it was night and day. Derrick Rose was coming back again, but Jimmy Butler took it upon himself to become a huge offensive threat. Because last season, no one was doing shit for the Bulls, and also it was a contract year. And he came into the season averaging 20 points per game with a 58% true shooting percentage, with him improving his game across the board. His three-point percentage went from 28% to 38%, his free throw percentage went from 77% to 84%, and his field goal percentage went from 40% to 46%. Now, Butler had shown signs of this in the past. I distinctly remember telling my dad sometime during the 2013-14 season that if Jimmy Butler drove to the basket more, I thought he could be a star-level player. And it turned out 13 to 14-year-old me was right, because Jimmy was one of the best slashers in the game in his season where he averaged 20. He shot 63% at the basket and shot 7 free throws a game. He also developed a mid-range jump shot as well as some handles that made him one of the best pick-and-roll players in the league. So Jimmy was now a 20-point-per-game scorer who was a lethal slasher, a good mid-range shooter, and he had a respectable three-point jumper, while being able to play all defensive second-team level defense. And as the years went on in Chicago, Jimmy's game developed further. He became even more deadly of a mid-range shooter and overall scorer, and as the years went on, Jimmy got better and better in Chicago. His mid-range game got even better to be one of the best in the league, and he actually became quite a good playmaker, which he wasn't in his first year as a star. But unfortunately, his first year in 2015 was really the only year where the Bulls put a respectable enough roster around Jimmy. They pushed the Cavs to 6 games in the playoffs and actually should have won that series, but they were screwed by a no call. But it's okay, I'm over that. Actually, I'm not, but we're going to move on anyways. Because of the lack of help on this roster, the Bulls eventually tried to rebuild around Jimmy by giving him a 90-year-old Dwayne Wade and an 80-year-old Rajon Rondo. It's safe to say that did not work. So then he was traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves because the Bulls really didn't see an avenue where they became a contender with him. And as a result, he got the Timberwolves as a top 4 seed in the West, but then he got hurt, and the team slipped to the 8th seed, and Jimmy blamed them for that. Particularly going hard on the young guys, and this is really where the notion that Jimmy is a toxic locker room presence really picked up steam. It existed a bit before on the Bulls, especially in his last season in Chicago, but he was really quite colorful with this in Minnesota. Then he was traded to Philly after a legendary moment of trash talk and dominance where he killed the Wolves starters with the third stringers while screaming about how much the team needed him, which they kind of proved to be the case. In Philly, Jimmy might have said a few offhand things here or there, and he might have said a few things in poor taste after the fact, but in general, there wasn't much drama that was at least public with him in Philadelphia. However, he ended up leaving them for the Miami Heat. And I think that has been pretty good for both the Heat and Jimmy Butler. I think this team had the right core of players to fit what Jimmy is. In terms of play style, mentality, work ethic, really everything that Jimmy represents, this team represented as well. There are a lot of hard workers and hustlers who talk shit to each other's faces and then move on with their days. This is the right culture for him, and I think he will probably finish his career in Miami. But that gets us to the verdict of whether or not Jimmy Butler is underrated or overrated, and to me, I heavily lean to the side of underrated. See, I think there is very little merit to the criticism of how Jimmy Butler acts in the locker room. From everything that I have seen, almost every time Jimmy Butler was right, or at least somewhat in the right. In the case of Minnesota, Jimmy allegedly yelled that they needed him. And, I mean, did they not? The only big difference between the Wolves before Jimmy was nothing. The team was essentially the same, but the addition of Butler made them a 4 seed before he got hurt, where they fell to the 8th seed in just 1 to 2 months without him. How is that the Wolves not needing him? I mean, Jimmy was right. Since he has been traded, the Wolves have done nothing but suck. That reminds me of, you know what, never mind, we're not doing that joke here. Now, you could argue that even if Jimmy is technically correct about the Wolves needing him, he really shouldn't say that. And I understand where you're coming from there, but I tend to disagree. A lot of people say that's ego, but I really can't blame a guy like Jimmy Butler for having an ego. Put yourself in his shoes. He was homeless when he was 13, and he came from that to being a fucking all-star in the NBA and someone who has tens of millions of dollars, and he did all of that through hard work. There are almost no bigger examples of coming from nothing to everything, not only just in basketball, but in life in general. If you work like that and achieve what you did from that work, how do you not have an ego? How do you not value hard work? How do you not expect something similar from your peers? I'm a big defender of Cat, and I don't hold it against him how he performed without Butler and how he performed in the playoffs, but Butler had every right to be mad at him. With Wiggins, I don't defend him at all, so feel free to shit on him as much as you want, Jimmy. That's just comedy. If Butler says someone isn't working hard enough, there's a good chance that he is overreacting because Jimmy works harder than 99.9% of NBA players. But I trust him when he says whether or not someone really wants it or not, because I think he can tell if someone wants it or not. Now, I saw a tweet during the Last Dance documentary coming out where they said that imagine someone yelling at you like Michael Jordan does, but instead it's Jimmy fucking Butler. And I'll admit that's pretty goddamn funny. But I don't think that's actually a fair, legitimate criticism. I don't think you should hold it against Jimmy that he's not a top 10 player and therefore he can't talk like that. I think as long as he walks the talk, it's all good. His mindset and his style of leadership isn't for everyone, but I don't think you should have to be a bona fide superstar in order to expect things from your teammates. I think that's fair for a role player to do, provided that that player is practicing what they preach. I know damn well that Jimmy Butler is working just as hard as he expects his teammates to. In fact, I know he works harder than that. So as long as he isn't being hypocritical about it, I don't have an issue with it. It's not like this is Shaquille O'Neal telling Kobe Bryant to work hard. And I view this as the reason for why Jimmy Butler is underrated, because I've seen people take this and use it as a reason to say that, well, Jimmy Butler isn't worth his baggage, so they'll rank him lower than he really should be. Fact is, Jimmy Butler is a top 15 player in the NBA at the minimum. I believe I had him around 12 or 13. And he is a hard worker. He's one of the best two-way players in the league. And if Jimmy has a problem with somebody, 9 times out of 10, he's in the right. So that is why Jimmy Butler is underrated to me. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.